Alright, the top 3 fires that we're going to be going over in today's update and forecast are the Bootleg Fire up here in Oregon, which is now up to 300,000 acres, the Dixie Fire near Paradise, which is up to 15,000 acres, and the Tamarack Fire in the Sierras, which is now up to 20,000 acres. Now, you can't really even see the Tamarack Fire in this satellite imagery because of this wave of moisture that's moving into California, and that's actually the second big part of the story that we're going to be going over. There's actually see where these flames are burning. That darker spot right there is where it has already burned in the past. So it's basically looking at the burn scar, and then you can see where the fire itself is most active. It's on that northern edge, stretching down to the eastern edge, and then it looks like the predominant wind direction is from the south, as most of that smoke is blowing up towards the north. So if we actually want to zoom into this fire and see where those hot spots are on the map and where we had that fire growth within the last 24 hours, hopefully the live stream is not lagging too much. I have about 40 tabs open. You can hear the fan on my computer going, so hopefully it's working. If it doesn't work, I'll just do another forecast. But again, this is the fire perimeter from yesterday, and then where you see those hot spots shows where it has grown in the last 24 hours. So before they can update the fire perimeter, you can see where the most active growth is, and it looks like it's mostly on that eastern edge, which makes sense because that matches up with that satellite imagery where we were seeing a large amount of that active heat coming from the eastern edge. So I would say out of the 3 fires, this is the most active right now. We have a large amount of hotspots, and like I said, this one is up to about 300,000 acres, and we're still only at about 22% containment. Now, the reason this fire is so active is, again, we just have a lot of dry fuels. It's been extremely warm. We have that red flag warning, and it's very hot as well. So it's really a combination of all the top fire weather factors really combining to help this fire grow. Now, what's helping to stop this fire is the 2,000 personnel that we have on it, and again, they are up to 22% containment on this, so that is up from the first update we did on this fire, so we're at least moving in the right direction. But I think the key thing to look at right here is that significant events. It says extreme fire behavior, there's crowning, there's running, there's spotting. Basically, what crowning means is where the fire is moving along the treetops. That's where you have some really extreme fire behavior. Running is when it's going relatively fast, and then spotting is where you can actually probably see it on this map. It's where you imagine right here is the major blaze. That's connected to the major fire. If you get some westerly winds coming in through here, they pick up some burning embers or some twigs from the major blaze, throw it out ahead of the fire, start little spot fires right there, and then that then creates a new problem, starts growing into its own little fire, connects with the major blaze, and that's where you get some really fast growth. So I think that basically sums up this fire. We've had a lot of extreme fire behavior with it, and again, it is up to 300,000 acres. I'd say if we need a silver lining, I always try to look for one. It would be that in the first forecast video to the second forecast video I did on this one, it grew about 60,000 acres. And from the second forecast video to the third one, it grew about 20,000 acres. So it appears, based on acreage burn, that it's at least slowing down a little. But again, based on all the hot spots we're seeing and the smoke we're seeing right now, I think this fire is certainly going to continue to see some active fire growth. So again, when it comes to evacuation warnings, always try to stay updated with your local resources, because this is a fire that is not exactly slowing down anytime soon. And I say that because it's really the combination of our 3 major fire weather factors that are all combining sort of in the wrong direction when it comes to this fire. We're having even warmer temperatures than we've had in the past. We're now into the high 80s to low 90s in some places. When it comes to the humidity, you can see we're still extremely dry. In the higher elevations, we're into the single digits. Just in this point that I picked, I believe it's relatively close to the middle of the fire. That's around 9 to 10 to 11% relative humidity. Again, the reason humidity is important is because the drier the air is, the drier the fuels are, and then the easier it is for that fire to spread, and also easier for any little spot fires to quickly ignite and then start growing on their own. And then also what's been a factor with this one is the wind gusts. During the nighttime hours, we do get a little bit of relief, but during the afternoons, that's where we get some gusts, especially in the canyons and drainages, where the gusts are up to 25 to 30 miles per hour. And you can see, if we look at the direction, it's mostly coming, it looks like, from the westerly direction. So that actually makes sense where we're seeing most of the fire growth on the eastern edge of that fire. You can think those westerly winds come in, just push the fire towards the east. So that is why we're seeing most of our growth on that eastern edge. If we want to look at a snapshot of the fire weather factors, you can see that temperature is going to remain warm. That's why we still have that red flag warning in this area. Tomorrow is expected to be in the low 90s once again. And unfortunately, we're actually expecting even stronger winds tomorrow afternoon. I imagine that might be some of that thunderstorm monsoonal energy finding its way up to the Oregon area. You notice they don't have any thunder on this map, so that's at least good news there. But we do have some higher wind gusts expected tomorrow afternoon, so not exactly trending in the right direction there. And you can see that we do remain extremely dry in the afternoon hours with relative humidity in the teens. So overall, to summarize the Bootleg Fire, there is a lot of active fire growth going on right now. It's up to 300,000 acres. It's going to remain hot, dry, and windy, so that will certainly be a fire we continue to follow over the next few days, or possibly, I hope not to say, but possibly even into weeks. So one thing I did want to mention, I usually don't show evacuation maps in my videos because by the time you're watching this, the evacuation warnings might change. But I do just want to show how great this one resource I found is. You can click on the fire. It shows you basically the evacuation levels. That red color is the level 3, go immediately, down to the level 1, which is just be ready to evacuate. And I put the link for that in the description. So that's a good source you can go to check for the most recent evacuation orders. Now, the next fire I want to talk about is the Dixie Fire. You can see pretty good amount of smoke coming off of it right now. It looked like it was calming down this morning, but in the last couple of hours we're seeing a lot more of that smoke popping up. And when I show you the live cam in a second, you'll see that we certainly are seeing some more active fire behavior just in the last couple of hours as it started to get hotter, drier, and windier. So that's the more zoomed in version. You can see how a few hours ago it looked relatively calm, and then as we get more recent, you notice that smoke really start to pop up right there. And I actually have the live shot that shows exactly what we're just talking about. You almost can't even see where the fire is, and then all of a sudden you see these two smoke plumes just really start to, it's not exaggerating to say blow up, that's actually a fire term, and that is what you would consider blowing up. It is some extreme fire behavior. We're seeing lots of smoke coming off of that fire, but the good news is, when it comes to the Dixie Fire, the most recent incident report that I found, I'll just show this first because I think it is a good thing to keep in mind as I give the rest of the Dixie forecast. The most recent incident report I could find said 0 structures are currently threatened and 0 structures have been destroyed. So that is some great news right there when it comes to the Dixie Fire. But if we want to actually zoom in to see where the active fire growth is, this I think is one of the most interesting fires when it comes to fire suppression tactics. The CAL FIRE, if you go to, I believe it's Plumas County on Facebook, they do full reports every morning where you can listen to the CAL FIRE representatives give the basic strategy that they're doing for this fire, and it's pretty interesting. On this western edge, that's been one of the top priorities because, again, they want to keep this fire away from our cities like Sterling City, Paradise, and Concow. And that's actually the other good news with this fire. The predominant wind direction the last few days has been from the south. So every time we've looked at this, most of the growth is to the north. And it looks like that's the case once again, just looking at this map. you can see where yesterday's fire perimeter was, and then you can see where those hot spots are, which shows where it's grown in the last 24 hours. Most of that growth is up towards the north. So that is actually some good news with this fire. It's still actively burning, but it's moving in the right direction away from our towns like Paradise and Concow. So just talking about some of the fire suppression tactics, like I said, this western edge and the southern edge have been some of the top priorities just to really keep this fire away from some of our more populated areas. And I'm happy to say that the CAL FIRE representative said they were making some great progress on both of these lines. And you notice that you don't see very many hotspots down there. So that's some great news. Most of these hotspots are up towards the north, which if you had to pick a place for the hotspots to be, that is the place you would pick. It's farther away from our cities. But something I would say even more interesting is this eastern edge. Now, if you look at that eastern edge, you can see this line right here. And what that line actually is the Union Pacific Railroad. And I specifically point that out, that line right there, because you notice that the fire perimeter basically seems to go right up to that railroad and then stop. Now the reason for that is because the Union Pacific Railroad actually has what they're calling a fire train, which goes in, it can hold a very large amount of water, about 100,000 gallons. They're actually using it to transport in some of the CAL FIRE troops as well. And it's just amazing to see how, with the help of all the CAL FIRE troops and then also with that fire train, they've basically been able to stop this fire in its tracks, pun intended right there, because it is literally stopping right along the railroad tracks. Now, what's interesting on this northeastern edge is you see there is still some distance between where the fire is and then where that track continues. And what the CAL FIRE representative was saying is they're expecting the fire to continue to back down this hill, which is actually good when it comes to fire behavior. You would rather have it going downhill than uphill. When it's going uphill, it can burn much, much faster. It typically burns slower when it's going downhill, so it's easier to control and contain. But you can see how some of those hot spots are starting to get closer towards the track on this side. So they were saying they're actually expecting the fire to come down right there, but then they'll try to do what they've done on the southern edge where they stop it in its tracks. Now, one last thing I'll say on this map is just the interesting components of weather that we're seeing with this one. This is the Feather River Canyon, and during the day, and especially the afternoon hours, we get what's called up canyon winds. So we get these winds blowing up towards the north, and again, that's the time of the day when it's also the hottest and the driest. So that's been part of the factor of why we're seeing most of that growth to the north. And then during the nighttime hours, the winds shift. They start going down canyon, which does pose some very difficult fire behavior for the firefighters, because it's basically like you're fighting two different fires throughout the day. There's one that goes up the canyon during the day, and then it tries to come back down the canyon during the nighttime hours. And again, that's one of the main reasons they really wanted to focus on that southern edge, because they didn't want those nighttime winds to really push it down closer to our cities. But it's good to see not many hotspots remaining in that area. So when it comes to the Dixie Fire, we're at about 15,000 acres right now. We did gain a little containment. We're up to 15% there. If we look at the personnel, we are up over 1,600 personnel, so that's increasing as well. 56 crews, we have 17 helicopters, 85 engines, 17 dozers, 17 water tenders, and like I said, 1 fire train as well. Now, again, this is one of the places where the fire weather factors have not really been in our favor. It's been extremely hot, it's been very dry, it's been very windy, so even though it has grown to 15,000 acres in the last couple of days, it's pretty amazing what our firefighters have done to control this one, just given the factors that we have had. Right there you can see afternoon highs today in the mid-90s. Looks like tomorrow afternoon we're still going to be seeing some warm temperatures. Again, when it comes to humidity, it's been very dry as well, into the teens and even single digits in some of our higher elevations. And then let's see if we can actually see those winds that I was talking about, how it's driving the fire behavior. You can see, if we zoom out here, it might be easier to see. But 25 mile per hour gusts up to 30 miles per hour, so that's pretty strong. That's what's driving that growth to the north. And you see it's coming from the south, which is basically what we've been talking about for why that fire growth is mostly to the north, especially during the afternoon hours when we get those up canyon winds as well. Now, when it comes to the snapshot of the fire weather factors, you can see very warm temperatures this afternoon with very dry humidity. So again, not working in our favor throughout the day today. Looks like tomorrow, it actually looks like it's getting a little bit better tomorrow. Again, we're still very low relative humidity and warm temperatures, but it looks like we're at least a couple degrees cooler. And perhaps part of the reason for that is when you do get a large amount of smoke, it actually blocks out some of the solar radiation, so that can actually cool you down a couple degrees. Just a weird little fact of how a fire can actually lead to a negative feedback loop. But looking at the humidity, it looks like we come up a little tomorrow, but the main thing I notice when it comes to the humidity is that this line is very flat. You normally want to see it jump up to 60 to 70% during the nighttime hours, but especially with this fire, it's just been remaining dry 24 hours a day, so that's why we're continuing to see some fire growth even during the nighttime hours, combining that dry air with those down canyon winds. Now, something you also might be noticing on this map is the chance for thunder, and that is, again, the big story we're going to be talking about at the end of the video, really diving into the lightning threat. But right there you can see for the timing for the area around the Dixie Fire, it looks like it's about Monday 11 p.m. to around 4 p.m. that we have the highest chance for thunder, although the chance is still 10 to 20%, which is, I would say, better than some of our other areas like the Sierras, where we have up to 50% chance of some of those thunderstorms coming in. So just the overall summary when it comes to the Dixie Fire, it is still actively growing, as you can basically see on this live imagery. That's the two large smoke plumes going up right there. It's up to 15,000 acres. It is going to remain warm, dry, and windy, but currently 0 structures are threatened, and our firefighters, with the help of a fire train, are doing some great work to really contain this fire and not let it get out of control. So if we go to the next fire, the next one we're going to be talking about is the Tamarack Fire, and this is one that I wasn't talking about only just a few days ago because it was still only 40 acres about 3 days ago. This one started on July 4th due to lightning. I paused there because I wanted to say fireworks, but it actually was started due to lightning on July 4th, and it remained below 40 acres for quite some time, and then about 2 to 3 days ago, it just rapidly started to grow, jumped up to 6,000 acres in one day, and then once I show the numbers right now, you'll see that it has grown all the way up to 20,000 acres now. So if we actually try to look at it, you can see some of that smoke at the very beginning of this frame, and actually you can see in the clouds, it looks like it's a darker color at the end here. That kind of shows you where the fire is, but it's hard to see because of that wave of monsoonal moisture that's moving in. That is, again, the cause of the possibility of thunderstorms later this afternoon. So it might actually be easier to see this fire if we look at the natural color fire. We might be able to see where the hot spot is. If it decides to load, we'll see if it does it on the second round. Yeah, right about there, you can see where those little hot spots show up. That is where the Tamarack Fire is currently burning. 1 second. I can hear how loud the fan is on my computer, so I'm just going to try to close some of my tabs here real quick before my entire computer shuts down. And then we'll get right back to the Tamarack Fire. You're probably wondering what that noise is. It's relatively warm up where I'm located as well, so computer probably close to overheating. So again, we're talking about the Tamarack Fire right there. It's south of Lake Tahoe, and if we want to actually see this, I think this is, I would say, one of the craziest alert wildfire camera videos I've ever seen. You can see early this morning, I'll actually go back to this morning. Early this morning, it was still burning actively, and then you actually notice they have to readjust the camera because the smoke plume starts going so high up into the atmosphere. Now, part of the reason we're seeing that just extreme smoke plume behavior is we're now mixing this fire with some of that instability and potential energy that's coming up from Arizona, which is creating that thunderstorm possibility. Again, I'll just play this one more time because that is just some, I hate to use large words like this, but that is just some ridiculous fire behavior there. I don't know if I've ever seen a smoke plume reach that high up into the atmosphere. So if we want to actually zoom in and see where the hot spots are with this one, you can see where the fire perimeter was yesterday and where the active growth is today. So you can see that's where the fire perimeter was yesterday. Those hot spots are where it has burned in the last 24 hours. And I think the most amazing part of the story of this fire so far is how great of a job our firefighters have done so far to really keep this fire from just completely going over Markleyville. You can see that it's almost a perfect horseshoe around it, and they are doing some great work for structure defense in that area. And that does remind me, for all of the fires that I'm talking about, I don't show the evacuation warnings because by the time you're watching this, they might change. But again, always stay updated with the most recent evacuations. That's also actually true for the Dixie Fire as well. Even though that one is burning in what we would say is the right direction, I did notice there were a number of new evacuations earlier this morning. So back to the Tamarack Fire, you can see we did have a large amount of growth yesterday, most of it, again, to the north. And again, that's the same reason that we're seeing that growth on the Dixie Fire. The predominant wind direction has been from the south, so it leads to some spotting where it takes up some burning embers from the major flame, drops it out ahead, starts new little fires, leads to more fire growth. And again, I'd say the big thing with this one is just to stay updated with all the most recent evacuation warnings. So most recent update, this shows that it's at 18,000 acres, although I did see from another report that it's now up to 21,000. You can comment down below if you've seen even more recent updates than that. One encouraging thing is much more personnel on this fire now. The first update I did on this, there was only 50 people on this fire, and you can see that the resources are just streaming in right now, up to 500, and I'd imagine by the next time they update this, we'll most likely be over 1,000 personnel on this fire. So that's good to see there. Fuels involved, timber, brush, mixed conifer. Again, this is an area where we have a lot of dry fuels. We're mixing the warm temperatures with the winds in the afternoon with some fuels that only received about 50% of their average snowfall or rainfall this last season. So very dry in this area. That's part of the reason that this fire has been able to grow as rapidly as it has in the last few days. Now, if we actually want to look at some of those fire weather factors, you can see warm temperatures throughout the day today. We're in the low 80s. In some places around this fire, we're actually reaching into the low 90s. And humidity has been another big factor when it comes to this one, especially in the afternoon. We've been seeing some humidity down into the teens. I don't think it's loading right there, but we have seen some humidity down into the teens and even the single digits in some places. Now, I do want to look at the wind gusts to see if it looks like most of that wind is mostly coming from the south, which really matches up with the direction this fire is moving. You can see it actually looks more southwest right there. And again, it's about 25 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts. And if we look at where this fire is growing the fastest, it's on the northeast side. So it's taking those southwest winds, pushing the fire forward to the northeast. That looks to be the predominant wind direction moving forward. So that will most likely be the region where we see that fire continue to grow. Now, when it comes to our fire weather variables, I would say there's some good news. It looks like we're seeing a drop in temperatures by a couple of degrees. Our winds, that's not exactly indicative. We do get some gusts in the afternoons up to 25 to 30 miles per hour in this area. But it does look like some of that monsoonal moisture that's coming in is actually going to raise our humidity, which is great to see. It looks like we're at a high enough elevation where that monsoonal moisture will be raising the humidity, which again is good because some of that can find its way into our finer fuels, which isn't going to stop the fire, but will at least not promote the fire with more dry air. Now, the big thing you're probably noticing on this, though, is that threat for thunder and lightning. Really starting as of right about now, it looks like that moisture is really starting to move in. We have a 10 to 20% chance of some of those thunderstorms and possible lightning. Actually, one last thing I wanted to say about the humidity. The reason we weren't seeing an increase in humidity in some of our other areas or our other fires is because they were at slightly lower elevations where it's still extremely dry. That's why it's mostly considered a dry lightning event, because closer at lower elevations, the air is actually dry, so if any rain did fall, it would actually evaporate before it hit the ground. But it looks like we're high enough elevation for the Tamarack Fire that some of that monsoonal moisture actually does work its way into the surface air. Just a little tangent right there. Back to the actual thunderstorm chances. Looks like from about right now until about 11 a.m. on Monday morning, we have a 10 to 20% chance of thunderstorms. And then it looks like tomorrow afternoon is the key time to look out for some thunderstorms in the Tamarack Fire area, where we get to 30 to 50% chance from about 11 a.m. until about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And then that moisture finally moves out by about 10 p.m. on Monday night. So again, possibility of some thunderstorms over the next few days, or couple of days, especially tomorrow afternoon. And you can actually see that moisture moving in on this map. It's that wave of clouds you see right there that's coming in from Arizona. And if we actually want to look at why that is, first I'm going to close a couple more tabs just because I really don't want my computer to shut down in the middle of a live stream. But okay, so looking at the weather map once it decides to load. So what's driving this thunderstorm threat? It's this high pressure system that's over places like Utah, Colorado, Wyoming. You can see that that high pressure system is strengthening over the next 24 hours and really next couple of days. We're going to see some very warm temperatures up in Montana, up into the triple digits. I would say the good news, I always try to look for the silver lining. The good news is that high pressure system isn't directly over us. If it was, then a lot of our fires, instead of seeing temperatures in the upper 80s to mid 90s, we'd most likely have some temperatures back into the triple digits. So it's, in one case, it's good to see that that high pressure system is not over us, because we're about 15 degrees cooler because it's over Utah instead. Now, the bad news when it comes to this high pressure system is, if you think about the circulation around it, it's clockwise circulation. So on the southern edge, we're taking all this monsoonal moisture that's over Arizona and just pushing it right into California. And again, you can actually see that on the satellite imagery right now. That moisture, you can see the direction it's moving. It's coming up from Arizona because of the circulation around that high. Seeing that another way, we can look at the relative humidity in the upper atmosphere. Again, I chose upper atmosphere because that's where these thunderstorms will be forming, higher up, not exactly like right on the surface. And just, this was showing Saturday, you can see almost all of California covered in that dry air. And then as that high starts to circulate some of this monsoonal moisture that you see over Arizona, you actually see that wave of moisture move into California. And this, again, I purposely went back in time to show this forecast so you could see that California was originally completely dry. But it's amazing to see that even a couple of days ago, how perfectly that matches up with what we are currently seeing right now. So this has been forecasted for a number of days, and it looks like it's coming to fruition. I think that's a word right there. But you can see that moisture moving through, and then eventually that will move all the way out and will transition back to some drier air, which again, good news and bad news. The good news is that means the thunderstorm threat will be gone as we get into Tuesday night. The bad news is then we still have some drier air for our fires, and especially the Tamarack Fire, which is actually able to pick up some of that moisture in the surface relative humidity. So when it comes to the current radar, I thought I'd show this instead of the forecasted thunderstorms because we're now officially in this event. As of right now, it looks, you can actually see the wave of clouds that's moving through. Currently, I'd say this is still looking pretty good. If just how to look at radar, you can see in Arizona where we have those yellow and red colors right there. That's where you get more of a severe thunderstorm. You notice we're not seeing any of that yet for this wave going through California, but again, I'm going to be keeping my eye on that because tomorrow afternoon looks like it's going to be the highest chance for thunderstorms in the Sierras, and it is the Sierras that do have the highest chance of these thunderstorms moving through. So overall, we do have that red flag warning in place. It's a combination of the fact that we're warm, dry, windy, we have extremely dry fuels, and with the possibility of those thunderstorms coming through, there is the potential for some new fire starts. So that is one of the top things I'm looking at right now. And you can see that red flag actually does stretch all the way up into Oregon as well, where we have the Bootleg Fire. Now, just looking at that one more way, you can see that they're expecting some abundant lightning in the Sierras. We have that red flag warning. And in the Sierras, they're actually expecting a little bit of rain as well. Not expecting that in places like the Central Coast where there's just the chance of dry lightning. In the Sierras, there is the possibility of some rain. Although I think the bigger part of that story is certainly the lightning. Now, one other thing you see on this map is it brings up air quality, and I haven't talked about that yet, so I'll just show the quick air quality forecast. If it decides to load, computer going very slow right now. Let's see. I don't think it is going to load. I think my computer has officially given up with my 50 tabs open and live streaming at the same time. I'll just try one more time. This is how live streaming goes. You never really know what's gonna happen, right? And this is actually a pretty cool graphic, so I would love it if I could get it to go, but it doesn't look like it. So I'll show this one instead. That shows the current air quality. It looks like the majority of California is into that moderate air quality, but right over the Dixie Fire and the Tamarack Fire, you notice we're into that unhealthy air quality. Now later tonight, once the winds calm down, that's actually bad for air quality because it allows some of that smoke to settle down to the surface. So we're expecting some unhealthy air quality over the Bootleg Fire, over the Dixie Fire, the Tamarack Fire, and even into the San Joaquin Valley as well. The forecast for tomorrow, again, looking very similar to tonight, expecting unhealthy air around the Bootleg Fire, the Tamarack Fire, and down in the San Joaquin Valley. So just a quick wrap up of our fires. We'll go down to the Tamarack Fire first. That was the most recent one we talked about. Again, that one is mostly growing to the northeast. It is up to about 20,000 acres, or 21,000 right there. That is the new updated number since I even started this forecast, and it is currently still at 0% containment. Then the other big fire that we talked about is the Dixie Fire that is going on in Butte County. That one is mostly growing to the north. Again, 0 structures currently threatened, and if we look at the numbers for that, 15,000 acres burned and 15% containment as of right now. I'll just scroll over to the right real quick so we can check out the Beckwourth Complex. You can see still seeing some hot spots on this northern edge, but looking much calmer than we were seeing in the past. That one is up over 100,000 acres. We haven't seen very much growth with that in the last couple of days. It was the first fire of the California 2021 season to go over 100,000 acres, but it is up to 73% containment, and the firefighters seem like they're pretty confident that their containment lines were going to hold, although they were very precautious, I think that's the word to use, about this lightning event moving through. They have a bunch of crews ready just in case any new fires start. They're going to be able to jump on that really fast because they already have about 1,000 personnel up there right now. Salt Fire, that's up over 12,000 acres, but 95% containment. Didn't really see any new hotspots on that one, so we're looking good there. When it comes to the Lava Fire, this is, I think, one of the first fires I was looking at this season. That one, let's see if we can get the numbers to pop up. There we go. 26,000 acres, 77% containment. Not really seeing any hotspots there. Maybe a couple on that eastern edge, but looking good when it comes to the lava fire. With the Tennant Fire, where that one did reach over 10,000 acres, but it's at 100% containment, so that one is all wrapped up. And then finally, we'll go back up to the Bootleg Fire. This is, again, the biggest fire going on right now. This is the one where we have the most smoke coming off of it. We're seeing some extreme fire behavior, some spotting. There's a large number of evacuation warnings in place. You can see all of those hotspots, especially on the eastern edge, where that fire is being pushed by the westerly winds. And again, that is most likely going to be the first fire this season to reach over 300,000 acres. But we are up to 22% containment, so we're moving in the right direction when it comes to our containment numbers. So that's the wrap up of our fires. Hopefully this video was helpful, and I'll continue to do these updates throughout the entire wildfire season. And I think the last thing I'll say is, again, stay updated with your local resources for any fire updates, because they have the most recent and local information. So I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.